Hello, welcome to the Hot Seat. I'm here with Professor Simon Hix to discuss the ongoing situation in Greece. Welcome, Simon. The situation in Greece is changing constantly, almost by the minute. So can you give us an overview of where we stand now?
Well, where we stand is we're at the latest showdown between Greece and the other members of the Eurozone. So from the Greek perspective, the Greek citizens have suffered 25% collapse in GDP. That's the largest collapse in GDP of any country in peacetime in the OECD, so any advanced democracy in peacetime. Huge collapse in GDP, very high levels of youth unemployment in particular, pensioners not able to be paid their pensions, a run on the banks, restrictions on how much money they can take out of the bank. It's real deep crisis in Greece. And so this is why Tsipras and Syriza, this new radical left government in Greece, has quite a mandate from the people behind it. I mean, we had this referendum where he essentially said to the Greek people, do you back me or do you want me to give in to the Eurozone? And they said overwhelmingly they back him. I mean, you can argue it's sort of cheap talk. It's very easy to back him because you don't really know what you're backing him on. So, that's the Greek side. And then on the other side, you've got the pressure from the German taxpayers, the Finnish taxpayers, and the Dutch taxpayers who are saying, why should we keep lending you money? We've got no confidence that you're going to ever pay any of this back. And so when we signed up to the euro, you signed up to a deal that said that you weren't going to run up big debts. And if you did borrow money, you'd pay it back. And so we're at this standstill from the two sides, and it's very difficult to figure out a way to resolve it.
So what's the outcome of the referendum that they held recently?
Well, the outcome of the referendum was he went to the Greek public and he said he was on the verge he was under pressure to give in on the latest package deal. So the German government, the rest of the Eurozone, came to him and said, we're going to give you more bailout money, a third tranche of bailout money, in return for really fundamental reforms of the state, cuts in public spending, essentially more austerity. He walked away from the table. But the threat then from the other EU member states is to say that means you're leaving the euro. And so, but he wanted to get backing from the public to legitimise the fact he walked away from the table. So he said, do you accept this latest deal on the table from the rest of the Eurozone? If you vote yes, it means I have to give in and we're going to have to accept this deal. If you vote no, you're essentially giving me a mandate to reject this deal and go back to the negotiating table and play hardball.
And so what are the proposals that Greece has recently put forward and what the impact that they're going to have?
So, it works both ways. So the Greek government has now come back to the table with a proposal, as far as I understand, to reform part of the state, to cut public spending, to think about how they can increase tax revenue, in return for asking for some kind of debt relief. And I think this is now the big debate within Germany. How much debt relief are they going to give Germany? Are they going to give Greece? I don't think they're going to say you don't have to pay it back. But what they might say is you've got a much longer timetable to pay it back. Very low interest rates, you pay it back over a much longer timetable. If they can't get a deal on this, I think the German government is now starting to consider, actually, would it be so bad that they leave the euro? If you have to reintroduce the drachma, what really would it mean? Well, from the point of view of Germany, it would mean a collapse in the value of the loans that they've given to Greece, no chance that they're ever going to get their money back. So I think the German creditors, both the private sector and the public sector, the government, lending money to Greece, they want some kind of guarantee. They'd rather get their money back at some point than not at all.
So as we sit now, there is a summit upcoming over the weekend. How will the various parties be approaching that summit?
I think that's going to be the crucial decisions now. The key issue there is going to be, have we got a deal that can stick? What they don't want is to be back in this situation in 2 months' time. They don't want to be back around the table with Greece saying, I'm sorry, we still can't pay. I'm sorry, we need more debt relief. We need more bailouts. We haven't managed to reform the state. We haven't passed their stuff through Parliament. We promised we'd pass through Parliament. We're not going to implement the reforms. And equally then the German taxpayers, the German government saying, we ain't giving you any more. If we end up in that situation in a couple of months' time, then I think there really will be pressure for Greece to leave the euro. And nobody at the current situation wants that. Nobody's willing to consider that. From Greece's point of view, this would be economic crisis, a collapse in their banks. They import about 80% of goods and services into Greece. The value of those they'd be massively inflationary if a new currency is introduced and collapses in value against the euro. And from the other side, not only are they worrying about not the Greece not being able to pay back its loans if they reintroduce a new currency. But what about contagion? What does it mean for Portugal? What does it mean for Spain? What does it mean for Italy? And so that's what they're really worried about.
So the issue of austerity is quite a contentious one at the moment. Is there much scope for the possible relaxation of austerity as a programme for Greece?
Not really, and this is part of the problem. From the point of view of the German government, and a point of view of a lot of other centre-right governments about Europe, they don't accept this idea that what's happening is austerity. They say these are necessary structural reforms that had to take place. We did some very painful things in our economy 10, 15, 20 years ago, and now our economy has been growing as a result of those changes. You need to go through those same very painful changes. So they don't accept that this is austerity. Meanwhile, on the left is saying, look at the United States, look at Obama, look at the fact that he's been pursuing a neo-Keynesian policy. He borrowed on the international bond markets and for a massive reinvestment in the US economy, a very classic Keynesian strategy. Spend money to get the economy moving, get people back to work. Why can't we do the same thing in Europe? So that is the politics of where we are right now.
So in terms of the debt, is there any chance of any debt being written off or perhaps relaxed over a longer time? You talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think any of the creditors are willing to contemplate the idea that Greece is not going to pay their money back. And so they're not willing to say, we'll take a cut in how much you owe us. What I think they are willing to say is you pay it back over a much longer period. Because they feel they're already hugely subsidising them by lending them money at very low interest rates. So by lending at subsidised interest rates, they're already saying we're subsidising you. In a sense, we're lending you money way below what the lending rates would be if you went to the private bond markets to try and raise this money. So there's a sense from not just the Germans, but the Dutch, the Finns, even the Slovaks, who are saying, we're lending money to you, we're subsidising the lending of this money.
So what future does Greece have within the EU and within the euro without wanting you to make yourself a hostage to fortune?
Yeah, I think, right now, I think it's still more than likely that Greece will stay in the euro. There'll be some kind of compromise deal. It looks like a messy compromise deal. Neither side want Greece to leave the euro, and ultimately that is what will drive them to some kind of compromise. It's clear the Greek people do not want to leave the euro, and it's clear that the German public does not want Greece to leave the euro. And ultimately, that's what I think will force both sides to compromise at the end of the day.
And Britain has committed to having a referendum on its own EU membership by 2017. How will this impact Britain's position, the negotiations, and the EU more widely?
Well, I think there's two issues there. The first issue is I think the rest of the EU are saying to Britain, we cannot possibly start talking about the British problem or the British issue or the British demands until we've fixed Greece. So, it seems what Britain is asking for seems relatively parochial compared to what the rest of Europe feels is an existential crisis of the Eurozone and of Europe in general. So they look at David Cameron and they look at the British government and say, can you just keep quiet for a little while until we fixed Greece? So that's one issue. The second issue is, I think, for the no campaign, i.e. get Britain out of the EU, the longer the crisis goes on in Greece, the stronger their arguments are. You see, Europe is failing. The EU isn't working. Europe is constantly in crisis. Do we want to be chained to this? And even on the left, there's growing views now to say the EU is undemocratic. The EU is imposing austerity. The EU is all about the dominance of a kind of centre-right ideology that's enforcing austerity and has no respect for democracy and the democratic wishes of the people. So we're starting to see some voices in Britain on the left now starting to be critical of the EU and maybe perhaps willing to join the anti-EU campaign.
Great. Thank you very much, Simon. You're off the hot seat.